Hello, my name is Rebecca. I'm here to share a story that still makes my heart ache when I think about it, but I need to tell it. Maybe it will help someone else avoid the nightmare I lived through. This is about marrying a well-respected pastor and discovering the monster hiding beneath his smile. 6 years ago, my husband passed away. We'd been married for 30 years, good years mostly. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, my whole world collapsed. I'd wake up each morning thinking, he's really gone. How will I get through today? The TV seemed pointless. Food had no taste, and I'd just sit in my empty house, wondering if I was even alive anymore. My children couldn't help much. My son David had settled in Toronto after marrying a Canadian woman. My daughter Sarah lived nearby. But between raising her kids and dealing with her in-laws, she rarely had time to visit. I understood they had their own lives. But understanding didn't make the loneliness any easier. One evening, scrolling through YouTube, I stumbled upon a sermon by Pastor James Wilson. His voice was so warm, so comforting. His message that night was about finding purpose in loneliness. Loneliness is a gift from God, he said. Through it, we seek Him more desperately. You're never truly alone. God walks beside you always. Those words touched something deep inside me. For the first time in months, I felt hope. Maybe there could be a new beginning for me. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since losing my husband. I started watching Pastor Wilson's sermons every evening. It became my routine, something to look forward to. After a few weeks, I wanted to experience his preaching in person. His church, Radiant Hope Community Church, was the largest in our area. When I asked around, several acquaintances attended there. Pastor Wilson's sermons are incredible, they told me. He's been on TV, writes for the local paper, such a respected man. You should definitely visit. So, at 52 years old, I walked into a church for the first time in decades. Pastor Wilson was even more impressive in person than on screen. Despite being in his early 70s, he was distinguished, charismatic, with perfect posture and impeccable grooming. Throughout the service, tears streamed down my face. I felt understood, seen, after so long in darkness. After the service, as I headed toward the exit, I stumbled on the stairs. Someone caught my arm, steadying me. I looked up, it was Pastor Wilson himself. "Are you all right?" His voice was as warm as I'd heard in his sermons. Up close, he was even more refined, a perfectly tailored suit, subtle cologne. "Yes, thank you so much," I stammered. "You're new here, aren't you? I'm James Wilson. Welcome to our church family. I'm Rebecca," I managed to say, touched that he'd noticed me among hundreds of congregants. "Rebecca, what a lovely name. I hope we'll see you again soon." His smile was radiant. I started attending every Sunday. His messages comforted me, and slowly, I began finding meaning in life again. I made friends among the congregation, feeling that sense of belonging I'd been missing. A few weeks later, after service, I was sitting alone when memories of my late husband overwhelmed me. Tears poured down my face before I could stop them. Suddenly, Pastor Wilson appeared beside me, his presence gentle and unobtrusive. "What's troubling you?" he asked softly. "You can talk to me." Through my tears, I told him about my husband, my loneliness, my struggles. He listened with such genuine compassion. Then he shared something that created an instant bond between us. "I lost my wife to depression," he said quietly. "She took her own life. I understand that loneliness, that emptiness that nothing seems to fill." We talked for over an hour that day. For the first time since my husband's death, someone truly understood my pain. Before leaving, he said, "Rebecca, whenever you need someone to talk to, Please come find me. If you're finding Rebecca's story compelling, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This story gets much more intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Your likes help us share these important stories with others who might need to hear them. We began meeting regularly 2 or 3 times a week. Then one day, he suggested, "Would you like to meet outside the church? Perhaps for coffee?" I was surprised but pleased. Why would someone as important as Pastor Wilson want to spend time with me? But I said yes, and those coffee meetings became regular occurrences. Somewhere along the way, he started calling me by my first name without the formal Mrs., and I felt something I thought I'd never feel again, butterflies. At my age, I found myself standing in front of my closet, like a teenager, agonizing over what to wear. I started going to nicer salons, wearing makeup more carefully. "Rebecca, you're so special," he'd say. "God sent you to me as a comfort." The congregation noticed his attention to me. I could feel the jealous glances from other middle-aged women in the church. Their whispered comments reached my ears. Why does he only pay attention to her? She's just new, why the special treatment? But I felt chosen, special. We were falling in love, or so I thought. From the moment I first saw you, I knew you were different. He told me one evening, "God truly blessed me by bringing you into my life. You make me feel young again." "You've given me my life back," I responded. I never thought I'd feel this connected to anyone again. One evening, he invited me to his home for dinner. "I want to cook for you myself," he said, "and I'd like you to see where I live." His home was immaculate bookshelves, filled with theological texts, a perfectly organized living room, warm lighting. It seemed impossible that a man living alone could keep such a beautiful space. The dinner he prepared was delicious, comforting like a mother's cooking. Afterward, over tea in his living room, his expression turned serious. "Rebecca, I've been praying about this, and I believe God has given me clear direction. He wants us to do his work together." He paused. "I want this to be your home. Will you marry me? Will you become my partner in ministry?" Time seemed to stop. Was this real? Was God truly giving me a second chance at love, at purpose? "Yes," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Yes, I will." That's when my nightmare truly began. When I told my children about my engagement, their reactions weren't what I expected. "Mom, isn't this too fast?" David said over our video call from Toronto. "How well do you really know him?" "Too fast? What's too fast about it? He's wonderful, a pastor, a good man." "Mom, being a pastor doesn't automatically make someone a good person," Sarah added carefully. "I'm worried you're rushing into this because you're lonely." Their concern made me angry instead of thoughtful. "Why are you both trying to ruin my happiness? Do you know how lonely I've been? When will I ever meet someone this wonderful again? This is my life, and I'm making this decision. Looking back now, I was a fool. I should have listened. But eventually, they reluctantly accepted my choice. 3 months after that first coffee date, James and I married in a grand ceremony at Radiant Hope Community Church. "A holy union blessed by God," the officiant proclaimed, as 800 congregants applauded. I wore a beautiful cream dress, and James looked distinguished in his suit. People surrounded us with congratulations. "Pastor Wilson found such a wonderful woman. You make such a beautiful couple." I noticed some of the middle-aged women watching with barely concealed envy, but I felt triumphant. I'd been chosen. The first few months seemed perfect. James was attentive, bringing me coffee every morning. "Did you sleep well?" he'd ask. "What would make you happy today?" "Your happiness is my happiness." At 52, I never expected to be treated this way. My status in the church transformed completely. Instead of being just another congregant, I was now the pastor's wife. Everyone greeted me differently, sought my opinion on church matters, complimented me constantly. Having you here makes our church feel so much warmer, people would tell me. Pastor Wilson is blessed to have found you. I won't lie, I loved the attention, the respect, the sense of importance. But that happiness lasted exactly 3 months. The first warning sign came when I planned to meet some old friends for dinner, an arrangement made weeks earlier. I'm meeting some friends tonight, I told James casually. Tonight? Where are you going? His tone had changed cold, suspicious. Just dinner with some friends from my old neighborhood. We planned this a while ago. His expression hardened. A pastor's wife shouldn't be out late at night. People will talk. I felt confused. But it's just dinner with friends. What's wrong with that? People might get the wrong impression, seeing you out at night. We have to be careful about appearances. I understood or thought I did. We had a reputation to maintain. Should I cancel? No, but please come home early. And check with me first next time. I went to dinner, but I couldn't enjoy it. I kept checking my watch, worried about getting home too late. When I returned at 11 o'clock, James was waiting. It's 11 o'clock. You were gone for 4 hours. The way he said it made me feel like a teenager caught breaking curfew. The time just flew by. I'm sorry. Next time, be more careful about the time. He turned away from me in bed that night, silent and distant. I felt guilty, like I'd done something wrong. I made him worry, I told myself. I need to be more considerate. But it only got worse. The following week, I had 3 social commitments: a friend's birthday party, a reunion, and a gathering with former coworkers. After the third event, James's mood was noticeably different when I came home. You're seeing friends too often lately. I'm sorry they just happened to overlap this week. It won't happen again soon. You need to focus on church responsibilities. You should distance yourself from worldly friends. Worldly friends? The phrase stung. These were people I'd known for years, good people. I'm not saying they're bad people, Rebecca, but we do God's work now. We need to associate with people who support that mission. This constant socializing, these evening outings, it's not appropriate. So you're saying I can't see my friends at all? I'm saying not so frequently. That night, lying in bed, I felt trapped. Was I overreacting? Was this normal for a pastor's wife? I convinced myself I was at fault. I've been going out a lot, I reasoned. I need to be a better ministry partner. My social life gradually disappeared. When friends called to make plans, I'd find myself declining, worried about James's reaction. At first, they were understanding. Oh, right. You're a pastor's wife now. You have to be careful. But after several rejections, they stopped calling. James seemed pleased by my increasing isolation. I like seeing you home more, he'd say. This is how I want you to be. Like an idiot, I felt validated by his approval. Then came the day everything crystallized, the day I first saw the devil behind the pastoral mask. I was walking home from the pharmacy when I ran into an old friend, Tom Martinez, who'd worked with my late husband. We hadn't seen each other in years, and the encounter was purely coincidental. Rebecca, you look wonderful. How have you been? I'm well, thank you. I actually remarried recently. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Who's the lucky man? We ducked into a nearby cafe to catch up. We talked about my late husband, our memories, how Tom was doing, my new life. Just ordinary conversation between old acquaintances. Through the cafe window, I suddenly spotted James standing on the sidewalk, staring directly at me. The expression on his face, I'd never seen anything like it. Cold, furious, dangerous. I waved, trying to appear casual, but he turned and walked away. "Was that your husband?" Tom asked. "Yes." "I should probably get home." I hurried back, my heart pounding. When I walked in, James was sitting on the sofa, arms crossed. That same terrifying expression on his face. "Where were you?" His voice was ice. I stopped at the pharmacy, then ran into an old friend. "Who was that man?" "Tom Martinez. He worked with my first husband. We haven't seen each other in years." James exploded off the sofa. "A pastor's wife, sitting in a cafe with another man? We were just talking. He was my husband's friend. I saw how cozy you looked together. How you were laughing, gesturing. Were you involved with him before?" "What? No." "James, this is ridiculous." "Don't lie to me." "I saw everything." "Do you have his phone number?" "No, I don't." "Did you exchange numbers?" "No." "Show me your phone." "Why?" "I need to verify what you're telling me." Stunned, I handed over my phone. He went through every call, every text message, interrogating me about each one. "This number, what's this?" "That's the bank." "And this call?" "The hair salon." I felt like a criminal being grilled by police. When he finally finished, he made his declaration, "Don't ever see that man again." It was an order, not a request. That night, I apologized for what, I'm not even sure. And here's the truly frightening part a few days later. When I mentioned I'd stopped by the cafe for takeout coffee, James said, "I know." My blood ran cold. "How did you know?" "I know everything you do, Rebecca. Everywhere you go." "Are you following me?" "I'm protecting you." "Protection." That's what he called it. But from that day forward, I felt eyes on me constantly. I'd glance over my shoulder while walking, scan cafe windows, wonder if he was watching. The cage was closing around me, and I was only beginning to understand how trapped I really was. Living under constant surveillance was suffocating. But what terrified me most was James's dual nature. At home, he controlled my every move, monitored my whereabouts, interrogated me about the smallest details of my day. But in public, especially at church, he transformed into a completely different person. "My dear wife works so hard," he'd tell congregants, holding my hand tenderly. "She's the anchor that keeps me grounded." I couldn't do this ministry without her. In front of others, he'd pull out chairs for me, bring me water during church events, gaze at me with apparent adoration. We looked like the perfect couple, a model of Christian marriage. People would comment on how blessed we were, how fortunate I was to have such a devoted husband. Each time I felt more confused. Which version was real? The controlling, suspicious man at home, or this caring, attentive pastor everyone else saw? Maybe I really was the problem. Maybe if I just tried harder, the good version would stay. But the controlling behavior escalated. One evening, I finally couldn't take it anymore. "This isn't right, James. I'm a human being, not your property. I can't live like this asking permission to go anywhere, being followed, having my phone checked like I'm a criminal. You need to be careful because you're a pastor's wife. Being married doesn't make me your possession. I can't see friends, can't go anywhere without your approval. And you're so different in public you play the devoted husband at church. But here you treat me like a prisoner. This isn't love, this is control." It was the first time I'd truly confronted him. I'd reached my breaking point. What happened next still haunts my nightmares. James's face transformed. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered completely. He slammed his palm against the wall with such force that pictures rattled. "What did you just say?" He was screaming now, all pretense of civility gone. He grabbed a cup from the table and hurled it against the floor. It exploded into fragments. Then he started throwing everything within reach: a vase, books, my laptop. Each impact punctuated his rage. You think you know anything? Do you have any idea how patient I've been with someone like you? How dare you talk back to me? I backed into a corner, genuinely terrified. This man was a stranger, nothing like the gentle pastor I'd thought I was marrying. Nothing like the caring man from those first months. Who do you think you are? Apologize. Now. When he advanced toward me, I dropped to my knees, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I won't say anything like that again. Please, James, please stop. I groveled, begging forgiveness for daring to assert my humanity. Only after I'd thoroughly debased myself did he finally calm down. If you ever defy me again, you'll regret it. You'll do what I tell you to do. Understood? Yes, I understand. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay rigid in bed, terrified and bewildered. How had the man who brought me coffee every morning, who'd courted me so gently, become this monster? How had I missed the signs? After that night, James dropped even the pretense of kindness at home. No more morning coffee. No more, did you sleep well? The warmth evaporated, replaced by cold control and constant criticism. My health deteriorated. I developed chronic headaches, insomnia, loss of appetite. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the hollow-eyed, exhausted woman staring back. 6 months earlier, I'd been radiant with happiness. Now I looked decades older. What have I done, I'd think? How did my dream of a second chance turn into this nightmare? I became severely depressed. Some days, getting out of bed felt impossible. The thought of food made me nauseous. Even my faith, which had led me to James in the first place, felt tainted and hollow. I finally decided to seek help. I found a psychiatrist and made an appointment. Though even then, I was making excuses for James. He's stressed with church responsibilities, I told myself. If I can just get better, be a better wife, things will improve. We can get back to those happy first months. What a fool I was. But fate or God had other plans. At the psychiatric clinic, I met Dr. Emily Harrison, a woman in her mid-30s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. I described my symptoms: the depression, the anxiety, the constant tension. When did these symptoms start? She asked. About 6 months ago, after I remarried. Are there specific stressors in your marriage? I hesitated. How could I explain without making James sound bad? My husband is particular about things. He likes to know where I am. He's a pastor, so we have to be careful about appearances. A pastor? Dr. Harrison's expression changed subtly. May I ask your husband's name? James Wilson. He leads Radiant Hope Community Church. Dr. Harrison's face went pale. She took a deep, shaky breath. Excuse me for a moment. She stepped out of the office. When she returned, she looked shaken, almost ill. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. She sat down, choosing her words carefully. James Wilson is my father. The room spun. What? I'm his daughter. And he told you his wife died? He said she died by suicide. From depression. That's a lie. My mother is alive. She lives with me. We escaped from him 15 years ago. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Escaped? Dr. Harrison's hands trembled as she spoke. My father is an abuser. He controlled my mother, completely isolated her, monitored her every move, manipulated and terrorized her. He did the same to me. We finally ran away when I was a teenager. We've been living under different names ever since. Everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The control, the surveillance, the rage, this was his pattern. I wasn't special. I wasn't chosen. I was just his latest victim. He told everyone we were dead. Dr. Harrison continued, tears in her eyes. He erased us from his history and started over. He became this respected pastor, built this new life, and no one knew what he really was. Does he know you're here? That you're a doctor in this city? No. We've kept our distance. We changed our names legally. I never thought. She looked at me with profound sympathy. I never imagined he'd marry again. I'm so sorry. I know exactly what you're going through. For the first time in months, I felt understood. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overly sensitive. I was being abused by a skilled predator who'd done this before. I can help you, Dr. Harrison said firmly. My mother, her name is Margaret Sullivan. Now she's an attorney. She specializes in helping abuse victims. Between us, we can help you get out of this safely. But I need evidence, she continued. Without proof, it's just your word against a respected pastor's. She outlined what I needed: recordings of his rages and threats, documentation of his controlling behavior, photographs of any property damage, copies of financial documents. And Rebecca, this is critical. Don't confront him. Don't let him know you're planning anything. Men like my father are most dangerous when they feel they're losing control. I left that appointment with something I hadn't felt in months: hope. I wasn't alone anymore. And I had a plan. Over the next weeks, I carefully gathered evidence. Every time James flew into a rage, I recorded it on my phone. The terrifying rages, the screamed threats, all captured. I photographed the aftermath of his violent outbursts, broken dishes, holes punched in walls. I copied every financial document I could find, discovering he'd been secretly draining accounts I'd brought into the marriage. Then, one evening, I witnessed something that shattered any remaining illusions about the man I'd married. James had told me he'd be late. Church business, he'd said. But when I stepped out briefly to pick up a prescription, I saw him on the street corner with a woman, a young woman maybe 30 years old. They were arm in arm, laughing intimately. I followed them, my hand shaking. They entered a hotel 2 blocks away. My heart pounding, I watched through the lobby window as they checked in. The woman's face came into clear view. She was a member of our congregation. I grabbed my phone and took photographs: James and this young woman, entering a hotel, his hand on her lower back. The church business was adultery with a congregant young enough to be his daughter. Any remaining loyalty I'd felt evaporated in that moment. This wasn't a flawed man I needed to support. This was a predator wearing a pastor's robes, using his position to manipulate and abuse vulnerable women. I called Margaret Sullivan, Dr. Harrison's mother, that same evening. When I met her the next day, I understood where her daughter got her strength. Margaret was 67, but her eyes were sharp and determined, the eyes of someone who'd survived hell and come out fighting. I know exactly what you're going through, she told me. I lived it for 15 years. But you're going to get out, Rebecca. And we're going to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. The evidence I'd gathered was damning recordings, financial documents, proof of adultery. Margaret began preparing a case, but she had one more piece of advice. When this comes out, it needs to be public. He's built his life on lies and his reputation. The community needs to know who he really is. Otherwise, he'll just move somewhere else and start over with another victim. I knew she was right. James had already done this once before: abandoned his first family, moved cities, reinvented himself. If I simply divorced him quietly, he'd find another lonely, vulnerable woman to manipulate. I know what we need to do, I said, but I'm terrified. Of course you are. Margaret said, squeezing my hand. But you're stronger than you think. And you won't be alone. Emily and I will be with you. We planned carefully. And when the day came, I was ready to face the devil in his own sanctuary. Sunday morning arrived like any other. James and I drove to church together, just as we'd done dozens of times before. He had no idea what was coming. To him, I was still the compliant, defeated wife he'd bullied into submission. As we pulled into the church parking lot, my hands trembled. In my purse was my phone, containing all the evidence that would destroy his carefully constructed life. In the back pew, Margaret and Dr. Emily Harrison waited, ready to support me. 800 people filled Radiant Hope Community Church that morning. The sanctuary buzzed with the usual pre-service energy, people greeting each other, children scurrying to Sunday school, the worship team warming up on stage. James took his place on the platform, commanding and confident in his tailored suit. The service began with worship songs, then announcements. Then James stepped to the pulpit to deliver his sermon. "Today I want to talk about truth," he began, his voice resonant and authoritative. "The Bible tells us the truth will set us free. But we live in a world of deception, where people hide behind masks, where nothing is as it seems." The irony was almost too much to bear. Here was a man whose entire life was a lie, preaching about truth and authenticity. He was about 15 minutes into his sermon when I stood up. 800 pairs of eyes turned toward me. The sanctuary fell silent. "I need to say something," I announced, my voice shaking but clear. "This congregation deserves to know the truth about the man standing before you." James's face went white. "Rebecca, sit down. Whatever this is about, we can discuss it later." "No. They need to hear this now." I walked toward the front, my legs feeling like they might give out, but I kept moving. "This man is not who you think he is. James Wilson is not a man of God. He's a fraud, an abuser, and a predator." The sanctuary erupted in confused murmurs. "This is clearly some kind of breakdown." James tried to regain control, his pastoral voice soothing and concerned. "Rebecca, you're not well. Let's get you some help." "I'm not having a breakdown. I'm telling the truth. For 6 months, I've lived with this man's abuse, his control, his rage, his surveillance. He's isolated me from friends and family, monitored my every move, terrorized me in private while playing the devoted husband in public." "These are serious accusations," James said, his voice hardening. "You have no proof of any, but I do have proof." I pulled out my phone. "I have recordings." I pressed play. James's voice filled the sanctuary, not the gentle pastoral tone everyone knew, but something monstrous. "You think you know anything? How dare you talk back to me? You'll do what I tell you, or you'll regret it." The sound of crashing objects, his screamed threats, my sobbed apologies, it all played over the sound system. People's faces registered shock, disbelief, horror. "That's not—" James started, but I cut him off. "There's more. This man told everyone his first wife died. That's a lie. His wife is alive, sitting in the back row right now." Every head swiveled toward the back, where Margaret stood and began walking forward. James's face transformed from shock to rage to panic in rapid succession. "My name is Margaret Sullivan," she announced in a clear, strong voice. 15 years ago, I was Margaret Wilson, married to this man. He abused me for 15 years until I finally escaped with our daughter. He told everyone we were dead so he could reinvent himself without the inconvenience of a family that knew his true nature. "This is insane!" James shouted. "These women are clearly working together to destroy me. This is a coordinated attack. I'm his daughter." Dr. Emily Harrison said, now standing beside her mother. I'm a psychiatrist. Rebecca came to me for treatment for depression and anxiety symptoms caused by living with my father's abuse. The same abuse my mother and I endured for years. The congregation was in an uproar now. Some people were on their feet, shouting questions. Others sat in stunned silence. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out my phone again. This congregation should know that Pastor Wilson has been having an affair. I displayed the photographs on my phone, then handed it to someone in the front row to pass around. That young woman is Jennifer Martin, one of our congregants. These photos were taken 3 weeks ago, when he told me he was at a late-night church meeting. Instead, he was checking into a hotel with her. Jennifer Martin, sitting in the third row, burst into tears and fled from the sanctuary. The congregation exploded into chaos. James tried one last manipulation. Brothers and sisters, please. The enemy is attacking through these women. They're being used by Satan to destroy this ministry. You know me. You know my heart. We know what you showed us, someone shouted from the crowd. But apparently that was all a lie. You've been deceiving us for years. How many other women have you hurt? The congregation's support shifted decisively. Some of the church elders climbed onto the platform, flanking James. His mask finally completely shattered. You're all traitors, he screamed, his face contorted with rage. After everything I've done for this church, I built this place. You're nothing without me. It was the same rage I'd witnessed at home, but now 800 people saw it. The gentle pastor was gone, replaced by the monster he'd always been. You need to leave, one of the elders said firmly. Now. And don't come back. Security guards volunteers who'd once looked up to James escorted him out. He was still screaming, still threatening, his voice echoing back into the sanctuary as they removed him. You'll all regret this. I'll sue every one of you. You haven't heard the last of me. When the doors finally closed behind him, silence fell. I stood at the front of the sanctuary, shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down my face. Margaret put her arm around me. Then something unexpected happened. The congregation began to applaud. People rushed forward, surrounding me with hugs and support. I'm so sorry you went through this alone. You were so brave to speak up. Thank you for protecting the rest of us from him. Elder Thomas Williams addressed the congregation. We've all been deceived, but Rebecca's courage today has given us the truth. As a church, we need to support her through what comes next, and we need to examine how we allowed this to happen under our roof. The church was true to that promise, but the legal battle was just beginning. With Margaret's legal expertise, we built an airtight case against James. The charges were extensive fraud, emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and adultery that violated the morality clauses in his pastoral contract. The hotel photographs proved the affair. The recordings documented the abuse. Financial records showed he'd been secretly draining my accounts and had done the same to the church's funds. Jennifer Martin, the young woman from the photographs, came forward with her own testimony. James had told her he was getting divorced, that I was mentally unstable and had abandoned him emotionally. He'd presented himself as a lonely man in need of comfort. She was devastated to learn the truth. I thought he really cared about me, she sobbed during her deposition. He used his position, his authority. I was so stupid. You weren't stupid, I told her. He's a predator. He knows exactly how to manipulate people. You're a victim, too. 2 other women from previous churches came forward after reading about the case in the newspaper. They'd had similar experiences James's pattern repeated across decades. Each time, when women got too close to exposing him, he'd quietly move to a new city and reinvent himself. The trial was difficult. James's attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-wife, Margaret as a bitter woman with an axe to grind. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings alone destroyed any credibility James had left. I had to sit in that courtroom and watch James try to charm the jury, to present himself as the victim of a conspiracy. He was still handsome, still articulate, still attempting to manipulate everyone around him. But this time, it didn't work. The defendant, James Wilson, is guilty of fraud, emotional abuse, and financial exploitation, the judge pronounced. He systematically deceived two families, a congregation, and the wider community. He used his position of spiritual authority to manipulate and control vulnerable women. The court sentences him to 3 years in prison, with mandatory counseling for abusive behavior. Additionally, he is ordered to pay restitution to Mrs. Rebecca Johnson in the amount of $150,000 for financial damages and emotional distress. When the gavel fell, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year: relief. Not joy, not triumph, just the simple, profound relief of knowing the nightmare was truly over. My children flew in for the verdict. David came from Toronto, and Sarah was there every day of the trial. "Mom, why didn't you tell us how bad it was?" David asked, his eyes red from crying. "I was ashamed," I admitted. "I thought I'd made such a terrible mistake." "You both warned me, and I didn't listen." "This wasn't your fault," Sarah said firmly. "He's a professional manipulator. He fooled an entire congregation for years. You're not responsible for what he did to you." That was hard to accept. But with therapy, Dr. Emily Harrison agreed to continue treating me. I slowly began to understand it. I wasn't stupid or weak. I was a grieving widow who'd been targeted by a skilled predator who knew exactly which vulnerabilities to exploit. The healing process was long and painful. I had nightmares for months, dreams where I was trapped in that house again, unable to escape, James's rage echoing through empty rooms. Dr. Harrison prescribed medication for anxiety and depression, and we met twice a week for intensive therapy. "You're experiencing post-traumatic stress," she explained. "What you went through was sustained psychological torture. Healing takes time, and there's no shame in needing help." Margaret became one of my closest friends. We'd meet for lunch regularly, and she'd share her own journey of recovery. For years after I left, I second-guessed every decision, she told me. I'd wonder if I'd overreacted, if things were really that bad. The self-doubt was almost worse than the abuse itself. "That's exactly how I feel," I confessed. "Sometimes I still wonder if I should have tried harder, been more understanding." "Stop!" Margaret interrupted gently but firmly. "That's his voice in your head, not yours. He spent months training you to blame yourself for his behavior. You have to actively reject those thoughts every time they appear." She was right. Recognizing those intrusive thoughts as James's programming, rather than my own judgment, was a crucial part of healing. Radiant Hope Community Church rallied around me in ways I never expected. They appointed an interim pastor, Reverend Michael Torres, a kind man in his 50s, whose sermons focused on grace and healing rather than judgment and control. "What happened here was a betrayal of everything this church stands for," he said during his first sermon. "We need to examine how we created an environment where one man could wield so much unchecked power. Real spiritual leadership serves others. It doesn't dominate or control them." The congregation voted to implement new accountability, structures a board of elders with real oversight, mandatory counseling training for all leaders, and clear protocols for reporting abuse or misconduct. Several people apologized to me personally. I saw signs, one elder admitted, his voice heavy with regret. The way he'd sometimes snap at staff when he thought no one important was watching. How he discouraged questions about finances. But he was so charismatic, so successful at growing the church, that I told myself I was imagining things. We all saw what we wanted to see, I said. He was very good at showing people exactly what they wanted to believe. My friendships slowly rebuilt. I reconnected with the friends James had isolated me from. At first, I was embarrassed, ashamed that I'd pushed them away. But they were understanding. We knew something was wrong, my friend Patricia said. You just disappeared. We tried reaching out, but you never responded. We thought maybe we'd done something to offend you. It wasn't you, I explained. He systematically cut me off from everyone who cared about me. It's what abusers do, they isolate their victims. Having those friendships back was like rediscovering parts of myself I'd lost. We started our regular book club again, went to movies, took weekend trips. Simple pleasures that James had stolen from me. My relationship with my children deepened too. Sarah and I grew especially close. I should have pushed harder when you said you were getting married, she said one afternoon over coffee. I knew it was too fast, but I didn't want to alienate you. I wouldn't have listened anyway, I admitted. I was so lonely, so desperate for connection. He knew exactly what I needed to hear. What are the warning signs? She asked. How do I make sure my daughters never end up in a situation like this? It was a good question, and one I'd thought about extensively in therapy. Isolation is the biggest red flag, I said. If someone tries to cut you off from friends and family, that's not love, that's control. Love encourages you to maintain healthy relationships. Also, that too good to be true intensity at the beginning. James swept me off my feet so quickly, I never stopped to question whether his feelings were genuine or whether he was love-bombing me as a manipulation tactic. What's love-bombing? It's when someone showers you with excessive affection, gifts, and attention early on to create dependency. Once you're hooked, they start showing their true colors. By then, you're already emotionally invested, and you keep chasing that initial high, thinking if you just do the right thing, the perfect version of them will come back. Sarah took notes on her phone. I'm saving this to share with the girls when they're older. About a year after the trial, I attended a support group for abuse survivors that Margaret recommended. Hearing other women's stories was both heartbreaking and healing. Each story was different in its details, but the patterns were eerily similar. The charming beginning, the gradual isolation, the control disguised as care, the rage hidden behind closed doors. My ex-husband was a successful surgeon, one woman shared. Everyone thought I was so lucky. But at home, he monitored my every calorie, controlled every dollar, and told me I was worthless without him. Mine was a police officer, another woman said. People told me I should feel safe with him. Instead, I was terrified every day. He knew exactly how to hurt me without leaving visible marks. When it was my turn to share, I told my story, all of it. The vulnerability, the manipulation, the mask slipping, the final confrontation. When I finished, several women were crying. Thank you for speaking out publicly, one woman said. What you did at that church that took incredible courage. You probably saved other women from becoming his next victims. That thought had sustained me through the hardest days. Yes, I'd been fooled and hurt, but by exposing James, I'd prevented him from doing this to someone else. Jennifer Martin wouldn't have been his last affair. There would have been other vulnerable women, other victims. The church continued to support my healing. Reverend Torres invited me to share my story during a sermon series on spiritual abuse. I was terrified, but I knew it was important. Standing in that same pulpit where James had preached his lies, I told the truth. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty," I said to the congregation, "but I want you to understand how abusers use religious language to control people." James told me that submitting to him was submitting to God. He said my independence was sinful pride. He used scripture to justify his abuse, twisting verses about wives respecting husbands or submitting to spiritual authority. I saw people nodding, some wiping tears. Real faith doesn't trap people, it liberates them. Real love doesn't control, it empowers. If someone is using God or the Bible to make you feel worthless, afraid, or trapped, that's not God talking. That's abuse. After the service, several women approached me privately. Two confessed they were in controlling relationships and asked for help. I connected them with Margaret and Dr. Harrison. Knowing that my story was helping others made the pain feel less pointless. 2 years after escaping James, I'm genuinely happy again. I live in a small condo I purchased with the restitution money from the lawsuit. It's modest, but it's mine decorated exactly how I want, with no one questioning my choices or monitoring who visits. I've gone back to school to become a certified peer counselor for domestic abuse survivors. At 64 years old, I'm starting a new career, using my experience to help others recognize and escape dangerous situations. Margaret and Emily have become like family. We have dinner together every Sunday, our own chosen family, built on shared survival and genuine love. Margaret's partner of 10 years, Susan, often joins us. Watching Margaret in a healthy, equal relationship has been its own form of healing. It shows me what love is supposed to look like. I've even started dating again cautiously. I met Robert at a community gardening club. He's a widower, retired teacher, gentle and patient. We've been seeing each other for 6 months, taking things slowly. He knows my story and respects my boundaries. When I have a bad day, when the trauma resurfaces, he doesn't take it personally. He just holds my hand and reminds me he's not going anywhere. "You're not damaged goods, Rebecca," he told me recently. "You're someone who survived hell and came out stronger. That's remarkable, not shameful." I'm learning to believe that. I still attend Radiant Hope Community Church, though I step back from leadership roles. I'm content being a regular congregant, serving on the hospitality committee, helping where I can without the pressure of being in the spotlight. The church has grown and healed too. We're smaller than we were under James. Some people left after the scandal, but we're healthier, more authentic. Last month, I received a letter from James. He's served 2 years of his sentence and is eligible for parole soon. The letter was full of self-pity and veiled threats, insisting he'd been treated unfairly, that I'd destroyed his life and ministry. I read it once, then threw it away. His words have no power over me anymore. Dr. Harrison helped me understand something crucial. I don't have to forgive him to be free. For years, well-meaning people told me that forgiveness was essential to healing, that holding on to anger would only hurt me. But Dr. Harrison explained that forgiveness is a personal choice, not an obligation. "What you need is to release him from taking up space in your mind," she said. "That doesn't mean pretending what he did was okay. It means accepting what happened, integrating it into your story, and moving forward without waiting for him to acknowledge the truth or change." That shifted everything for me. I don't spend my days consumed with anger anymore, but I also don't minimize what happened. Both can be true. I've moved on, and what he did was unforgivable. If I could speak to my younger self, that grieving widow who first walked into Radiant Hope Community Church, I'd tell her several things. Your loneliness is valid, but it doesn't make you desperate. Take time to grieve properly before seeking a new relationship. Trust your children's concerns. They know you better than a stranger does, no matter how charming that stranger seems. Isolation is not protection. If someone who claims to love you wants to cut you off from everyone else who loves you, that's a warning sign, not a compliment. Your voice matters. If something feels wrong, speak up even if the person is a pastor, a community leader, or someone everyone else respects. You deserve to be treated with respect, dignity, and autonomy in every relationship. Love doesn't require you to surrender your identity. And most importantly, it's never too late to reclaim your life. I'm 64 years old. I thought my story was over when my first husband died. Then I thought it was over when I discovered James's true nature. But I'm learning that our stories don't end until we do, and even the darkest chapters can lead to new beginnings. I'm writing this now because I know there are other women out there maybe watching this video, right? Now who are living with the kind of secret terror I experienced. Maybe you're wondering if you're overreacting. Maybe you're making excuses for behavior that frightens you. Maybe you feel trapped because of your age, your financial situation, your community standing, or your faith. Please hear me. You are not alone. You are not crazy. Your instincts are correct. And it's not too late to get help. Reach out to a domestic violence hotline. Talk to a counselor. Confide in a friend. Document what's happening. Make a safety plan. You don't have to live in fear. My life isn't perfect now, but it's mine. I wake up without dread. I make plans without asking permission. I laugh with genuine joy. I've learned to trust my own judgment again. And I've discovered something I'd almost forgotten: I'm stronger than I ever knew. If I could survive what I survived, if I could find the courage to expose a man an entire community respected, if I could rebuild my life starting at 62 years old, then you can take whatever step you need to take toward freedom. Your story isn't over either, and you deserve so much better than you're receiving. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there realize they're not alone. And I hope it reminds all of us to look beneath the surface, to question authority, and to believe survivors when they find the courage to speak. God doesn't want us to live in fear. Real love casts out fear. It doesn't create it. May you find your courage when you need it most. And may you know deep in your bones that you deserve to be free.